big and small, rich and poor. No, it should be stopped. But what they says to play, so continue with it. So I developed this play just to test the idea whether death is important in our society or not. Then we started the play. One person fought death, and then because there were no incidents of death, those who were sick were not dying. In fact, old people who were pains everywhere were not dying. Women who had gotten pregnant for 3 years were still moving about. You know what they say in some Therefore, as we are not dying, they are also not coming. So the people fought with dignity to send back death's mortals. That is over. They sent it back. And then over there, people were dying, and then over here, people were getting death to, and the rest. But the question is, death protects the man. How long did we fought him? So this will be years after years, not dying. What were they doing? They have to bring you, send you into the room in the evenings. When the sun is coming in the morning, they give you back. And the man to do that. Therefore, they have to bury him. They have to bury him alive. And I went to where to see where he buried the man. Sometimes they say he makes noise because it's not there. Because they have rejected him. In the play, I brought 3 people who planned to go and fight death. Therefore, the 3 were all living forever. And they were old. They wanted to die. What do I want to tell? People who watched the play wrote to me asking about the solution. And I said, nature for us, in our culture, we believe in nature. Whatever nature has given us, we have to adhere to. Therefore, all deaths in the play, meaning that human beings contribute to our deaths. And this play is going on and on. Next time we make like this, we'll put it out. Thank you.
Thank you. In the interest of time, this is what we are going to do. When we ask a question, maybe the first 3 will take it, and then we move on to another set of questions and after that. So, Prof, now that you have the mic, yes, we are moving to the question in terms of what do we see as the role of elders in our institution? What are some of the academic responsibility, institutional responsibility? Our keynote speaker raised a very pivotal question. We want our elders in our education system. What are the terms and the conditions? Would they show up only for us to ask for their CVs and say that, well, you don't have PhD, so we don't know how we have to deal with you? What are the terms and the conditions do you envisage for our elders to be engaged in their care?
So I think that as we try to bring elders into our system, first of all, I have a critique for that question. I think we tend to focus so much on formal educational side that sometimes we forget about other spaces of education. For example, the home. If I feel that if we want to highlight the importance of elder critical knowledges, then we need to highlight the important place of the home, the family home, and the home in all of its various meanings. And that's because that's where much of the knowledge transfer needs to happen. Because many of our students or our children will be in school, they learn and they're not seeing the impact of that. And that's because there's something happening within our homes. And so I feel at some point we should also talk about what happens outside of the school system and the role of elders within those spaces. But to answer your question, I think that especially in a neoliberal context and all of its negative representations of what it means to be an elderly person. Most elderly people are vulnerable. And so if you're going to bring them into this system, this educational system, then we need to decolonize this system so that it cares. And I think that Elder Chris emphasizes on this notion of care. And that also means that when we bring these elderly people into our system, we need to make sure that they are being taken care of psychologically, socially, financially. I think that the keynote speech highlighted compensation. And I think when we do something like that, we need to think about it as a, well, I guess the point I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of exploitation in the educational system. And there's a way in which bringing elderly people within the system without recognizing the ways in which this system exploits labor, that could further put them in very vulnerable positions. And they are already vulnerable in this neoliberal system that emphasizes being young, being cool, and so on. So if you're not young and cool and highly educated, you are thrown off, you are not important. And so when we bring them into this higher education institution, which is gradually becoming neoliberal, we need to highlight the importance of care. And what does care mean, especially once we start dealing with elderly people as knowledge makers in our system? Thank you.
Jumps into the conversation. I think earlier on when we were asked about what is an elder, I think that those of us who speak to elder, we try to emphasize that there is a clear distinction between an elder and an elder. And usually in academic writing, we write an elder with a capital E, whereas an elderly, which is something that comes with age, we write with a small e. So when we are talking about an elder with a capital E, we are speaking to a particular status that is ascribed by the community. And the irony, and I wasn't surprised when our keynote speaker said, am I an elder? Because usually elders don't go around saying, I am elder. It is a status that our community ascribes to them. And the communities know who their elders are. And I think that, Dr. Ajima earlier on was alluding to that in terms of the way the person is known as the cultural custodian. People go to them for source of wisdom and knowledge. And so, Doc, we are back to the question, Dr. Frimpong. In addition to what Dr. Inaku have already shared, what do you see as academic responsibilities, especially our academy, our institution, is an avenue of exploitation. We are the only people that take people's knowledge and make it our own. And then insist that when you are going to talk about something that we took from the community and write about it, you should cite it correctly. Yeah, so I like to take it from the policy perspective. And I think that there are in these discussions, when we look at it from the perspective of getting the elder to come to academia, it becomes very difficult. We are struggling with how to accomplish it. But there are no hanging fruits that we can take. And one of them is our language policy in education, and which has a huge problem. We're in Ghana where we've said before that we start a child in school with English, which is very problematic. Currently, what we are practicing is that the child goes to school and the local language is used. The dominant language is used for the child from kindergarten to, and from there we switch to English from primary 4 to ever communication. This, though an upgrade from the earlier one, is still problematic and usually is a kind of an upgrade or even an insult to what we are discussing. The fact that what we mean is that now English from primary 4 going
is a superior language to our local languages, because that is the language that is being used predominantly as the medium of instruction, so much so that even when we teach our local languages, we must reflect, look at those languages from the perspective of English, which is a problem, which is a burden. And we signal to the young people that their local language doesn't matter. It's not important. It doesn't put food on the table. It is English that does. And we are just looking at it. And to correct such a policy, we will talk and talk and talk in circles and not accomplish anything. Because we are saying one thing with our local, we seem to be promising, and yet the reality is negative. Look at what happens. When a child goes to some schools, they do entrance exams. The entrance exams is in English. Meanwhile, the policy expects that you take the child through these traditional folk laws and the African knowledge systems. So the child is prepared before he goes to school. So the brain is not empty. When you go to school, then we use the same language that we were used to, to teach you in the cultures and wisdoms of the elders in the school. So we welcome you with the same language until you adjust. Then we switch to English, which are being condemned. But now we started from primary one, and they are learning English, everything. And so I think the policy must be looked at, and we must influence the policymakers so we change this language and education policy. Otherwise, as I said, we'll be moving in circles. Chapter. Because it's been taken from the policy perspective. One of the models guiding academia and epistemology is the biopsychosocial model. And we've not gone beyond that. We know that as Africans and in parts of Asia, we should go beyond that. Biopsychosocial, spiritual, cultural. Then the government, the curriculum GTEC, and GTEC was mentioned, now understands that, oh, there are people who also matter in the knowledge discourse. So if I'm a researcher and I'm writing a grant, I have a budget item for elders who could be assembly members, community, blah, blah, blah. So I think we have to take it from even healthcare behavior and all that. We have attempted to limit our perspective by forming, say, associations, say, why. Are we ready to diversify, or want to just be in a straight line? Because the challenges we have in Ghana may not be the same as they have in Nigeria or elsewhere. I think these are broader. Lastly, on campus, for instance, we have radio universe that occasionally invites researchers. Oh, we see your publication. Do you want to come speak with us? I think those are platforms where you can invite elders who have knowledge in our proverbs, in our cultural stuff that you can come to discuss. And lastly, we need a repository. We need to build a platform. These days, internet is not so difficult to set up. So we need a repository where we can, as Prof said, the display needs to be both in text and in short videos that we can always
All right, thank you. Elder in this context is anyone, irrespective of age, who is decolonized, who is ready or uses indigenous knowledge systems. And we normally talk about SDG 4. It talks about equitable quality education by 2030. But if you drill down to, I think, 4.7, it talks about education being hinged on the indigenous knowledge of the people. And you see, when it comes to the higher education, it's quite easy. I got funding just last year. We did something on reliability framework, and we have agreed that every course should have an aspect of that employability framework so that by the time students graduate, they know about employability. I do say, as a scholar, teaching. Some of my PhD students are here. One of the courses is, I teach them community governance, leadership, and whatever. And when we get to female leadership, I give them a list of female heroes in Ghana. Then I tell them to now find and give me a write-up of at least 3. So we are telling the African story. One of my PhD students here, she was writing about virtual teaching during COVID-19 and all that. She comes to me, bro, I'm going to use Twat, I'm going to use TPAC. I ask her, do you know that our approach to teaching is different from those who develop? What about Ubuntu? Why don't you pick one of these theories, which is technology, and then support it with Ubuntu? Because we are more cooperative. What we go through, you can be a PhD student without a laptop, but over there, it's a common thing. You see, so talking about it at the higher education level is easy. But what about pre-tertiary, where curriculum is imposed on teachers and they have to finish at all costs? This is where the issue of policy comes in. That as educationists, we need to have a common front and have an agenda for government that this is how we want our education to be. Let's also not forget our education is supported externally. So we need to think broadly. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I know that there are several parts, so we need to take our snack in 11 points. So I'm going to give each one of us 1 minute to just share your thoughts so that we go for our snack. And then when we come back, then we go into the first session, we can continue the conversation. But I want to mention that where I am in Canada, Memorial University, the indigenous communities there have a policy that the knowledge level of an elder is equivalent to a PhD holder. So when you are engaging them, whatever compensation that you will give to somebody with a PhD, they demand that similar amount should be given to them. So we are not deliberating on something that is beyond scope. It exists elsewhere, and it is possible for us to brainstorm it in our level. So 1 minute for each of us. Any lingering thoughts that you feel you need to bring up to enrich the conversation, please.
Thank you very much, Prof. And my 1 minute, I'm going to just support what Dr. Professor Frampong said, and then also, one of us spoke about the radio universe, where some of these programs can be so that people can learn. But you cannot replace the media or the radio universe or whatever when it comes to the teaching that elders can give us. For example, in terms of our language, there's something coming up in language. I don't know whether Professor Yekun came, but then he has always been. Good morning. Prof has always been educating the media person anytime he goes to Peace FM about this way. That we don't know we and it's like all media, personalities and even politicians use menya akwenya. Now, if these persons were socialized into our language when they were maybe young and not the English language that everybody speaks with the children in the house, and thank you, okay, and all the time ending with okay, perhaps they could have picked akwenya from the family and can now extend it to whatever work that they are doing. And so here we need the elders because you can never do this without the language of the people. And language carries our culture. And so to be able to propagate our culture, we need the language. We need our history and then our worldview.
so that as Ghanaians and Africans, this is us. I cited an example during the webinar that a faculty member came to us at the department and was supposed to have a class in my, with my course, social dermatology. And once he was speaking in English, I didn't really hear that. I said, what for the team? Now, was to their language. Then he said, in my place, we use our local language in teaching. So the English was a problem, But here, when you're even teaching and there's an example, you want to use the local language, it's like wabon. You don't know what you are doing. So that's why you are saying yourself or maybe down or whatever. But I think it's time we take a second look at this, and then we'll be able, because our culture, the language carries our culture as a people. Thank you very much.
And I want to also add that what we are doing here today, I wish it makes a direct impact on what happens in our education. And I've observed a lot of problems, even at the basic school level, that when our children come home, you can attest to it, that they bring problems and riddles, and you think that they are doing what we are talking about. But when you look at them, you question it that they don't reflect the realities now. They are things that used to happen in the past, which cannot be brought to mind when they are talking about them. One of them, they will say, I just gave you a move, and then there's a riddle. That one is past. If the child of the modern time doesn't do it outside for police want to come and like to come when they, and they talk about realities like they're saying, say it properly, we could be also, but we could be also what we know is when they went to the local place of convenience and then I was squat on there. And now we don't do it on there. And so when we are promoting these things, then we need to think about the times so that the discussion is not about just history, but the culture is also about the experience education, so that the child can think about what we are teaching that child. So they don't see what we are teaching them as irrelevant and disconnected from their social realities.
Thank you. I think I'll just follow up from what Dr. Frimpong said. I think really, in the end, what we need to practice in our educational system and elsewhere is this Sankofa epistemology. And Sankofa epistemology, so not just, they don't just highlight, the past, right? It's this interconnection between the past, the present, and the future. And so when we think from that perspective, we realize that even the traditions and the historical materials that we repurpose for contemporary educational purposes would have to be contextualized and recontextualized. Because often when we think of, African knowledge systems, you think that it is frozen in time. Somehow it happened in maybe a long time ago, the 5th century. And we want to try to bring what happened in the 5th century to contemporary. There's a sense that this culture doesn't change, it is stuck in time. But when we think about what we are doing from a Sankofa perspective, Sankofa itself allows for change, transformation, innovation, creative thinking. And so that means that it's not just a question of just transposing what happened in the past onto the present and of course the future, but it's about thinking creatively and weaving new narratives based on new local experiences. Thank you.
As soon as you make mention of Sankofa, then I say yes, you've done well. Because my thesis was on Sankofa in drama, study of Akan clan symbols and the Dinka symbols. I had the privilege of writing a paper with Professor Ajeko, and it was on semiotics. I'm thinking that language is not only spoken. Maybe that is where, but in our cultures, we have symbols and signs that will tell you what I want to tell you. In fact, if you understand, you'll be able to know what I want to say. And then, as he said about Sankofa and the time trinity, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, you realize that nothing is done in this world in a vacuum, especially creativity. Everything has been in existence, and we're only trying to recreate and rediscover and going on. So Sankofa is very important in our teachings and then getting the people to know what it is. We need to rework it. And Sankofa is everything. You go to the hospital, the doctor will ask you to give him or her your history. You based on that history to be able to give you whatever. In fact, he's depending on that. Judges, they have something that they call jurisprudence. When a case comes to the table, you will have to refer, get to the bottom, and then be able to give that. So everything that we do is embedded on itself. And we need to reconceptualize it and let it work for us. In fact, during creation, they said, and God looked back and said, biblically, it was good. And then again, even during creation, God said, let's create man in our own image. It means there was an image on which God looked at to create man. So God himself sanctified.
Thank you. God sanctified. That's a new one for us. So about 2 years ago, I ordered a plane for 13 hours to go to Vancouver from Ghana. A keynote speaker, 30 minutes. The chair, we were really late even before my time for break. The chair had to take 5 minutes of my 30 minutes to speak to the land. And I was just thinking, wow, it's an international conference. And we didn't have time to say Asasiya and all that today. Yes, and Asasiya is a female and she's so pregnant. And currently we are leveraging on that wisdom and insight from elders and Asasiya to in behavioral interventions, as Dr. Iman mentioned. So I'm a positive psychologist. We develop behavioral change intervention programs. And then we chanced on Proverbs. And also because of our context, most people are low literate. And how can you help them to understand psychological constructs and follow up to change their behaviors? So then came the CAPI framework. So I can spend 30 minutes teaching a class about collaboration. Or I can spend 5 minutes talking about a proverb that says, one hand washes the other, and together they wash the face. And in psychology, we have the person activity fit. If something we follow through. So it's really, when I saw this workshop, this is a gold mine that I think this discourse must continue and be practicalized. So we can use that to make change and move forward. And once he's here, I know he wants to. Yes. Okay.
Take the last one from
So
Professor Samala Posa.
I'll take my name. Thank you so much. So we look at Canada when it comes to local knowledge systems and the outcome. And just 2 weeks ago, I got to know there is a white British who has settled in Ghana, and all that he's doing is to help us decolonize our curriculum. And what's happening? It was too much. Therefore, a lot of advocacy is needed. We publish, get promotions, that's it. We get grants, do this, and write a report, that's it. So as scholars, they end them. I think beyond publishing, what we have done in a very modest way is what I started in 2022, account folklore as a framework for education in Ghana. Somebody can do a event, Tabani,
we get a framework of guiding our content, education based on our settings. Then I did one with the Nigerian localization, where we looked at Ghana and Nigeria, came up with framework. Then I did a master's recently, and all I did was to develop a framework for effectively supporting visual impaired students who learn online. These are all IKS systems. And the last paper we published 2 weeks ago, which I sent to Doc, is about societal relevance of higher education. What did you do? An Afrocentric framework, where we came up with a gamut of philosophy from all over Africa. So I think in writing papers, you should also be contributing to frameworks. I don't know when people will start citing me, but I know very soon with this awareness. So let's all do it and leave a legacy. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We take the concluding thoughts of our discussions.
Thank you very much. Our elders say that we can finish eating, but we never finish talking. Several years ago, one of our own, Pra, raised a very important question. If the whole Africa and our knowledge system is limited to African Studies Department, then the question is, what are the rest of our departments doing? And I think it's a very critical question. That it is about time that our education system revisit the knowledge of our land. We keep talking about the challenge we are facing in our contemporary times. We are not the only generation that know the worth of gold. Our Nananu have been using gold for more than 700 years. But they were also teaching about the land. That to the extent that you can't even go to the forest at a particular time without performing certain ritual. There were certain leaves that we were not even allowed to touch it unless you perform ritual. What happened to this knowledge? What happened to this ancient wisdom about not messing up with the river source or the banks of river, because those were the sacred land and the habitations of the gods? To the extent our present generation are desecrating the land and the cultural resources. It's raising a very critical question. More than ever before, it's more pressing question. Where and what is the role of our elders in our knowledge system? And I'm very grateful to our chair when he started the ceremony with the land acknowledgement. And I think that it must be part of our university culture. In Canada, it is not possible for any university institution to embark on any formal meeting without first doing land acknowledgement. How many of our students know that we got this land as a gift from our God traditional elders to have this university? How many of them know that our elders' cocoa farm, money accrued from that was used to build this university? How many knows that our elders and community leaders from northern part of Ghana who use their labor to build this university? What are we giving back? It's a very critical question. And I know, and you all agree with me, that our panel members have brought rich ideas. But we know that no matter whatever we share, it is just surface scratching of the lingering question facing us. And we are hoping that after our snack, we will come back to the break rooms and continue the conversation.
Thank you very much. Please let's give our dear panelists a big round of applause. We appreciate all of you. Please, while you are still seated, we will be going for our snack break. We'll take a group photograph and then we'll enjoy snack for 15 minutes. After the 15 minutes, we break ourselves into two, and we will have an eminent two scholars to lead the discussions, so we'll be able to generate the key ideas, when should we start, where should we go, and all that within 1 hour, after which we will just welcome our chair to conclude this particular session. So we will welcome Dr. Ofuliapre, who will lead the panel in room number 8, which is our small conference room. And I must say, Dr. Apre is a quantitative teacher. He also loves language and context, contributed to policy development and graduate education in Ghana. And we know her experience will bring to bear to help us. And we also have a historian and a scholar. Indeed, he's done a lot for Ghana, and he's a respected Ghanaian historian and cultural advocate. I've told Nana Katanka that indeed the suit she's wearing, we'll try to explain all the symbols in it, and be able to appreciate the Sankofa and also the traditional symbol that we have and what we use the hours. So Nana, you also lead the discussion here, so we'll be able to generate the ideas immediately we finish with the snack break. So before we go for the group photograph, let me acknowledge Professor Michael Tigo, Prof. We're very happy to have you, former Provost College of Education, and also Professor Namzoya, our immediate past HOD for Sociology, Professor Namzoya is here. And I want to super acknowledge, we call him Openia Jekum, but here, Professor Jekum, we went to him for ideas, suggestions, how to go about this. And he assured us that, look, do it this way, do it that way, and be able to get it done right. Professor Jekum, we appreciate you very much. And while you are still standing, I told Chairman General Nanaya Pesenko, we also dedicate this program in part to Peace FM for the leadership in using language as part of what we are discussing. And Openia Jekum certainly has done a great job representing the University Ghana everywhere in translating our culture, educating Ghanaians on all fronts. And so Openia Jekum, we appreciate you very much. And I know this is just the beginning. The bigger project will come and we engage all the stakeholders with it. And then Professor Jacobson, sorry, Prof. We appreciate your support very much, being here supporting us. So thank you all. At this point, we want to move to the garden. We'll take a group photograph, we'll have our snacks, 15 minutes, and then we'll break to the two groups for 1 hour, we generate the ideas, and then the team leaders will share succinctly what the ideas are, and Madam Chairperson will just give us the concluding remarks. So please, okay, there's an announcement. Okay. So please, I guess we've taken photograph of the panel. All of us, it would be nice if we get a photograph just by the garden. So please, we beg of you, we will stretch a little, we will have our snack, and then we'll take the group photograph ahead of the snack. So please, let's get there. We thank you, our MC, we thank you, our DJ, steering the sounds for us. We thank you all for the morning session. All those supporting the Zoom, YouTube, we appreciate all your support very much as well. So please, let's go for the group photograph, and then we'll have snack break for 15 minutes. Thank you all.
Okay, so that's
So at this point, we finished the first part where we welcomed the keynote address, and we've also welcomed the thoughts of the various panelists. We've seen that we need a lot of work to do. We need to reflect. We need to conceptualize a number of things to support our Ghanaian educational reform that we need. We want to go for a quick commercial break. When we come back, we will break into two groups and generate further ideas, so we'll be able to learn more how we can integrate our indigenous wisdom and knowledge to support Ghana's educational reforms. Thank you all. Okay.
Yes, I'm bringing it to the microphone.
Yeah. So we'll put somebody. Okay. And we'll bring it up.
Yes, please.